All right, Sean, we got back-to-back weeks, you and I, sir.
Yeah, let's do it.
Mr. Mickler, as you guys already know from last week, Mr. Mickler's on holiday with the fam. And so you guys are getting Sean and I for the Ask Me Anything episode. This is our show that comes out every Wednesday. And there's an interview show that Ryan does with high caliber individuals on Tuesdays. And then he has his Friday field notes on Fridays. So we're going to field questions today from the Iron Council. That's our exclusive brotherhood. To learn more about that, go to orderofman.com/Iron Council. And then we do have a handful of questions that we're going to pull from our Facebook group as well. And you can connect with us on Facebook at facebook.com/group/orderman. Sean, let's just get right into it. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Okay, man. All right. So Sean Combs, I have a perfectionist tendency. Even as I write this, I've erased it 3 times and 30 times in my head. I know what I need to do, but if the circumstances are not perfect, I don't do it. Any suggestions on how to change this? That's a good question. I like this question.
It's a really good question. I don't know if I have a good answer for him specifically. Just it threw me when he said I've rewritten this question 3 times. That's a whole different animal. I mean, my coaching for any of the guys that I see that have trouble with this is just to take action, even if it's little actions, and start with things that you're not totally comfortable with without things being perfect. It could be anything. It could be stuff like this, writing a question and just sending it or whatever, just the smaller things. And then building from there, kind of like working out, right? You're not going to go take the big actions that you need to right away. And you start with the little things and work yourself into it. But I mean, honestly, if you really, if that was an honest thing that you redid this question 3 times, I mean, I think there's other issues of OCD and things like that. I mean, if I'm being totally honest, what would you say?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess I want to connect to what's the problem. So let's get clear on that, right? Because he alludes to it, but I'm curious, Sean, if you think there's more to this quote unquote being a problem. So let's dissect. If the circumstances aren't perfect, I don't do it. So that's fair to say that's a problem, right? Because there are things outside of our realm of control that are not going to be perfectly aligned, and thus it's never going to be perfect, and thus you're not going to take action. Is there any other problem? Like, what's the problem? And I'm kind of, teeing this up, right, for discussion. Yeah. What's the problem with the fact that he rewrote this question 3 times? Is it effectiveness?
There's a difference between, I call it paralysis by analysis. There's a difference between wanting things to be right, wanting to know what you're doing before you do something, and just having to have things perfect before you do something. There's a drastic difference between the two. It's just like, how do you know if you have OCD or if you're just clean? Well, if you have to tap the door 3 times before you go in and out, or hit the light switches or whatever it is, if there's those things, that's a different animal. And so that's why the action part, just even if it's little things, when it feels uncomfortable, if it doesn't feel totally perfect, can be helpful, because you start to break those patterns of everything having to be absolutely perfect. And so, like you said, like you mentioned, there's just wording in that question that for him specifically, I think is maybe a deeper problem. Like he should probably go and talk to someone about that. But for all the paralysis by analysis guys, it's catching yourself. It's the same thing that comes with catching yourself from doing time wasting things and turning it into productive things. This is one of the things I coach people with in a lot, is that if you look at your week, people ask us, especially during the new year, hey, how do I how do I stay on task? How do I make sure that my New Year's resolutions stick? What are some things I can do? And I tell everybody, you have to replace your bad habits. It's the habits that kill you with resolutions. That's why they don't stick. And so the first thing you can do is figure out how you're spending your time weekly. Just like if you want to save more money, the first thing I tell people to do is track your money for a month. Literally everything that goes out, everything you spend on, even cash, just track every single thing. And then at the end of the month, you'd surprise yourself with where you waste money. You realize you do it. It's the same thing with our time. If you track your time for a week and all the places you waste time, then all of a sudden you find hours and hours in every day that you typically, for most people, that you were wasting time, and then replace that with productive time where you can go out and get things done. And so for the paralysis by analysis guys, you do that with your quote unquote study time. Or guys do this by reading or listening to podcasts, and they count that as their personal development. You reading isn't developing you. You taking action on the things that you're reading is what develops you and makes you better and enables you to be the best version of yourself. But you just gathering more information is just, I mean, I saw Robert Kiyosaki do this, the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I was at a thing with him, and he was talking about your capacity, and we all have a certain capacity for the information that we can store. And he said, you take in more information, and it's like filling a cup. And he has this pitcher of water, and he starts filling the cup, and then he's talking, and while he's talking, it's just overflowing onto the stage. And he's like, you gathering more information without taking action on anything that's already in this cup
doesn't make your
is
cup
doing
bigger.
exactly this. Yeah. And so that's, again, to answer the question for the paralysis by analysis guys, it's look at the time that you think is productive, that you're actually wasting by studying and gathering more info before you're taking action on things, and figure out what are going to be the most effective actions to take immediately on those things that you're quote unquote studying about. So sorry for the long answer, but I think that's,
Yeah. I mean, for me, I'm thinking Sean here, right? It's like, well, I don't know, Sean, I wouldn't have wrote it 3 times. Right. But in the same breath, I get criticized by people all the time because my grammar sucks. And, I should have used a comma when I should have on a post or whatever. Right. And there, because I'm like, did you understand the message? Yes, you did. Okay. Well, then I don't care. So there's key areas where we're going to have a little bit more passion and intentionality because it's meaningful to us. But Sean, I do this in certain areas where I want it to be a certain way, and I actually lose sight of the bigger picture and the strategic objective, right? So from a leadership perspective, I may say, hey, we're going to roll something out, and I have a vision in my mind of what that needs to look like. So the question is did the documentation and the presentation need to be perfect, or was the bigger play here an opportunity to give an employee some reps to learn and grow? And it's not going to be perfect, because the more important thing is an opportunity for this employee to, get a rep in and get some practice. So sometimes I'll put perfection around things that aren't important. An analogy we've used on this podcast in the past has been like your kid's room being clean. Do we want the room clean, or do we want our kids to respect their things and be orderly? You could get the room clean, but it may come at a cost of your relationship with your children. If your intentionality is let your kids learn, then the room may not get exactly clean, but you've addressed a bigger strategic objective. So I'd be careful of the weight that we're putting around the thing that we want perfect, and make sure it's the right thing. It's the higher priority thing, or it's the strategic thing. The second part is not everything's in our realm of control. And I think he wrote here, if the circumstances aren't perfect, I won't do it. So let's use something really basic. And you kind of alluded to it already, Sean, going to the gym. That totally happens. In fact, this is perfect analogy. That happened today. It happened today. I am completely out of integrity today. And I didn't get up when I wanted to get up, and I didn't go to the gym, and I excused it because I'm lazy. And the excuse I used was not good circumstances. For whatever reason, I didn't feel my Garmin go off. That's usually what I do so I don't wake my wife up. I didn't feel that go off. By the time I checked it, my window of opportunity for my workout was exactly an hour. And I don't like that. I like an hour and a half because I like to take my pre-workout, kind of chill out in the house a little bit. You know what I mean? Go to the gym, and it always takes about 120 minutes to work out. So I knew my workout wasn't going to go the way I wanted it to go. But here's the rub. Would I have been better off going anyway and gotten a solid 45-minute workout in? Would I be better off today? And the answer is yes. But I used the perfect circumstances as a reason not to execute. And how many things are outside of our realm of control? And so, Sean, I would assume that maybe by your tendency to be a perfectionist, which I can relate to, by the way, sets you up to have your expectations constantly not being met as well. And what a disruption. And so now you're saying, well, any suggestions? My only thought is, for me, it's mindset. What's the price I am paying for my level of perfectionism? And is it worth it? And just getting clear on that, because that will move the needle more than a hack or more than anything else. Just like, is this worth it? Is this going to get me? Is this going to deliver my results? And I would probably suggest, if you evaluate your circumstance, it's not going to get you the results you're looking for.
If I can just add one thing, I had this thought. Is it worth it is good, but I think also what's more important. Because as you were saying this, when you mentioned articulating a message to your team and making sure that you give that message to them and they go out and execute. Have you ever, I'm not even going to ask if you've ever done it, because I know you have. If you've been in any leadership capacity, we've all put together a presentation or had thoughts that we wanted to articulate to our team. And we spend tons of time coming up with the facts, the details, the intricate parts of the plan that we have. And then we go out and we articulate that message to them. And then when we're done, we're like, oh, I forgot to say this. I didn't articulate that well. I don't know if this resonated. And the team can end up leaving feeling like they're executing a different part of the message you wanted them to get. Have you ever had that happen?
Yeah. Totally.
And the reason that happens is because we spend more time putting together the plan that we want done than we do practicing how we're going to articulate it to them so that they receive the message in the right way and they go out and execute on the things that are more important. And so sometimes when you're preparing for anything, you need to figure out what's most important and make sure that that is going to be carried out in the way that's most important to you and the people you're communicating with also.
Let me use another extreme, maybe even a more extreme example. How many of us, everyone evaluating as you're driving in your cars or wherever you're listening from, how many of us are incomplete in a relationship in our lives with a parent or a sibling or an uncle or someone else, and we have prolonged the resolve of that relationship because we've still been waiting for the circumstance to present itself for us to have that difficult conversation? It's never going to be good. In fact, actually, I take it back. I do know. I you know what? I know the golden egg. I found the solution, Sean. I know the right time. Actually, I know the right time for Sean to write. I know the right time to resolve a relationship for everybody in your life. I actually know all the right time. You know when it is? Right now. That's the right time. And the more we delay things, like I've even done this in a professional setting where I had this idea that like I wanted to like give some feedback to an employee because they're doing awesome. And I like wanted it perfect, right? So I delay it. And I delay it so much that the value of me wanting to communicate was lost because I waited too long. And how many things are left on the table due to us sitting back waiting for circumstances? Man, the price is probably substantial. Probably substantial. All right. I don't know if we want to beat it up anymore.
No,
Any
that's
other thoughts
good.
there? You're
No.
tempted. You're tempted.
I am tempted.
Do
I was
it.
just looking for,
Say it.
I was just looking for a quote that someone posted in Mighty Networks, like asking for favorite quotes. And somebody put a quote that was so good in there about procrastination. And so as you were talking about that, I'm on my phone right here trying to find it right now. I'm going through
and I'll find you the counter to your amazing quote on procrastination. I have the best one ever.
Go ahead as you have that. And then we can even go into the next question. I'll find it by the time we get there.
No, we're just going to play on our phones during this entire episode and have like odd
weird pauses, uncomfortable.
This is great.
Breaks.
Okay. Have you heard of the company called Despair?
No.
So this company, this used to be probably popular way back when. I'm dating myself. But you know those inspirational pictures, right? Like it's a beautiful picture of a mountain, a guy climbing the mountain. It has like a word, and it's an inspirational poster. So this company back, man, it may have been the early 2000s. This company called Despair more or less made posters to mock all the motivational posters. And instead of like a positive message, they're like super negative. And it's really funny. Anyhow, there's a Despair poster for procrastination and it's super great. And imagine a guy like sitting on a ledge and he's looking over a vast area of space, right? Some mountains and clouds in the background. And you see this text that says procrastination. And here's the phrase: never put off until tomorrow what you can. Oh, no, my gosh, this isn't the right one. Hold on. I'm ruining it. Oh my goodness.
While you're finding that, one of my favorite ones is always procrastinate later. I used to say that all the time.
Procrastinate later.
Yeah.
All right, I found it. Here you go. Procrastination. Hard work often pays off after time, but laziness always pays off now.
Yeah, that's a good one.
There you go.
This one, here it is. It's so simple. It stood out to me because it was so simple, and for some reason it stood out to me. It says, and who posted this? Federico Quintanilla Jr. It doesn't say who said it, but he said, if eventually it has to get done, do it now.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, it's so simple, but to me, it was pretty profound, right? If eventually it has to get done, we all know what those things are. Do it now.
It resonates. All right, man, we better move on. Otherwise,
Brian's going to beat this one to a pulp.
All right. Regan Huffner, what is the best tip or tool you have for building good habits? I've learned a ton of great things in the last years, but I still struggle to build habits that will help me apply my knowledge. Thanks for all you do. Habits for applying knowledge. I like this.
Yeah, we were just talking about that. So yeah, perfect transition. I just talked about some of the things that you can do. You have to find the space for new habits, which means generally you have to get rid of some of the things that don't serve you. So the first step is doing that. Figure out the biggest time wasters, the things that don't serve you best. Decide you're going to get rid of those things, but then replace them with your new habits. And all of the best books on habits say that. There's The Power of Habit is a fantastic one. What's the other one? I'm spacing on the
Atomic Habits.
Atomic Habits. Yeah. Both of those books essentially say the same thing. They're both really, really good. If you haven't read those, I'd say read those. And those basically say what I said before. Find the bad stuff, get rid of it, replace it with those good habits. And then the key is you have to just start taking action on those things immediately.
Yeah. So Regan, there is Jim Quick wrote a book called Limitless. I highly recommend on the subject. And one of the key things that he suggests is that you should always be asking yourself, first of all, he says, study in segments of 25 minutes. That's it. Take a break. And then I think it's 25-minute segments. And they actually have a name for these. But anyhow, breaking down your studying. But always be asking the question, how is this applicable to me? How am I going to implement it? And when? Constantly applying it to your circumstance. And I would suggest that if you're learning something that you can't apply to what you're doing, you probably shouldn't be learning it. I know that sounds a little extreme, but I can't count how many times, at least from a corporate organizational perspective, right? When we look at employee learning and development, that it's like, oh, well, let me send Sean off to a boot camp for 2 weeks to learn whatever. But it's not applicable to anything he's doing. The probability of retention is almost like nothing. And when you look at Bloom's taxonomy, the highest levels of learning is in creation. So you need to get to analyze and create in the content that the knowledge that you're gaining. That is what you need to get to. And you're not going to be creating and analyzing unless you're applying it to your circumstance. And it's an actionable thing that you can take to act on. Memorization for reciting is like the lowest level of learning and a waste. It's like that cup, right? You're going to remember it for a little bit, and then you're going to take on new data, and then you're just going to be overflowing and you're wasting your time. So get to creation by always asking yourself the question, how is this applicable to me? How am I going to implement it? And when? So there's a level of commitment to it. Now, there's a bunch of other strategies around be humble, consider the fact of what you're learning you don't know, right? Consider that, taking action on it, teaching other individuals, a review process. There's a lot of little nuances, but I would suggest look into Jim Quick and his book and a lot of his content around how to retain information. That's kind of his specialty.
That's good. I forgot I did this not when I read his book, but I just added something to it because a while ago I decided I was going to, while driving around, listen to books and podcasts while I'm driving, just to help with that. But what I added to that was those books that I'm listening to, they don't help me as effectively as when I read them with a highlighter. I like reading books with a highlighter so I can highlight, implement the stuff that stands out. But one of the things I started doing was while driving, if I heard something and it stood out so much, like, man, I need to do this, I literally will make myself pull over. Even if I'm on the freeway, I'll find an exit or something to just pull off onto the shoulder and make a note in my phone on that thing so that I can go back to it and implement or do whatever I need to do, just so I don't lose that prompting is what I call it. Because there's a reason why we feel that way or have those thoughts when we're listening to or reading those things. And so if you can't be with a highlighter, you could still be effective is what I'm saying. And there's different ways people do it. But the goal should be in all those things that we're doing, to be able to implement those things in some way in our life.
Yeah, totally. All right. Kenneth, Limosnero. I'm training jiu-jitsu. Would you recommend doing barbell training or kettlebell training? Thank you. That's it, man. Barbell or kettlebell with your jiu-jitsu?
Yes.
Either? Okay. Yes.
They're both for such different things, right? I mean, I work with the trainer too, so maybe it's an unfair thing because my trainer looks at what my body needs, how I'm tweaked, if I'm standing straight, if I'm a little crooked or whatever. And that's a lot of times how we decide kettlebells or barbells. But I've also done workouts where I've worked with both. And so it just depends on what you're trying to gain.
Yeah.
I don't think
I
it's specific to jujitsu. Do you? I mean, you've been training jujitsu way longer than me.
I would, how's this? I would suggest, in the grand scheme of things, if my workout was all about optimizing for jujitsu, then all workouts I would do would be functional training, without a doubt.
Yeah.
I've had segments where I had times in my life where I was doing strictly functional training. I didn't notice it, but my teammates were like, whoa, dude, you're faster, you're stronger. But I didn't sense it because that functional training showed up and affected my jiu-jitsu in a way that just good old bodybuilding exercises just don't. So, but I would put that in the category of functional training, not in the category of barbell versus kettlebell. But kettlebell training often would fall under functional training. But to your point, I mean, you know what I'm saying? So, Kenneth, if you're asking like ideal training for jiu-jitsu, I would say functional training that is, always counter, push and pulls, high reps, intensity, minimal resting,
core engagement,
dying machine. Yeah. Devil's tricycle, all that miserable, Bulgarian bags, sandbags, all the miserable, 400 reps kind of workouts that are super tough. Yeah. I think those are probably best for jiu-jitsu, but maybe even look into, I shouldn't be making references if I can't remember people's names. So the original founder of Jim Jones in Utah, he was a rock climber. And I'll look up his name and share it a little bit later. But he started Jim Jones for optimizing rock climbers. And then if I remember the story correctly, he started doing jiu-jitsu and then altered a lot of his workouts to optimize jiu-jitsu. And thus Jim Jones has a kind of a reputation or a soft relationship with the grappling and jiu-jitsu community because of that. And a lot of what they do is high intensity functional training. Those guys, I mean, if you just do some YouTube searches of Jim Jones, you'll be seeing some crazy stuff, like single arm barbell snatches and clean, you know what I mean? Those guys are just nuts. So, anyhow, functional training, there's your answer.
Well, that's the thing. If you say functional and you had to choose between just a dumbbell and a kettlebell, then I agree with you. I'd say kettlebell, because generally you have to engage your core more to use kettlebell, where you don't with the dumbbell, right? So that would probably be the stronger between the two. And now all the fitness guys are losing their minds. Oh yeah. Wishing they could give real advice.
Who are these two guys to know what they're talking about? Here you go. I don't actually know what I'm talking about. So Mark Twight, the founder of Jim Jones. You can look up his content. All right, Ryan Mills, what tactics do you both use and suggest other men to use to discern between truth from error in your life? There are many counterfeits of truth out there, so discerning the truth from lies or failing into the trap of my truth seems highly important for men.
Ryan tends to like these because, there is no my truth. There's just the truth. Yeah. I love that. I'm sure his comments explode when he gets into that one. But I mean, really, it's a matter of being honest with yourself, where you messed up and how you can be better by those things. I think that's what it comes down to, is finding the cause and effect in your life and being able to honestly navigate, okay, I did this and this happened in my life. And was that good or was it bad? Why? And how can I change down the road? What can I do differently the next time I'm faced with that circumstance so it can benefit me as opposed to hurt me? And I think too many of us don't give that honest assessment so we can be better. Instead, we posted up as, well, that's just the way I am, or or even worse, it's my dad's fault because how he treated me when I was a kid, or it's my, whatever, my upbringing, where I grew up, all of that stuff. And none of that is true. That's just the excuse that we use. So looking at the actual truth of choices you made, actions you took, the result, and how it can be better the next time.
Totally. Yeah. How's this? I'm going to jump on the my truth debate here. So
good. One of us has to.
It's not a debate, but here's what's valuable. One, that you never use that for yourself. Right. So the rule about this is you should never be going, well, Sean, my truth is, oh, stop it already. Right. Like it's almost I don't want to slap someone if I heard that. It would be so annoying. However, use that on other people because they might be so in the box that they don't know. And it's actually really valuable and empathetic for me to listen from the perspective that Sean thinks his perspective is truth. That's actually valuable for me to have that because it helps me understand the human condition, helps me understand humans.
I don't want to cut you off,
but oh, go ahead.
I don't want to cut you off, but when you say use that on other people, just because you kind of lost me for a second, and I think I've brought it back to what you're saying is that you're saying, say that maybe that's their truth when you're dealing with somebody.
Totally. Not to give them an excuse, but understand that's how humans work. What's truth? Are you joking? We're all walking around thinking like what's true, and it's regurgitated information that we heard from someone else. You don't actually know. And Sean, I'll ask you, is there times in your life with what you thought was true for you at that moment, and you look at it now and you're like, that wasn't.
Like I was so stupid. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't know what you don't know. And so we should always be challenging ourselves, but understand that sometimes people are in a box and they're so blinded. And I don't say that in a mean way. They're so blinded in their ignorance, and they really think, they honestly believe that their life is the way it is because they are zero control and woe is them. They really believe it. And I'm not saying we make an excuse for them, but understand it. Understand it that when your wife gets upset, that when you did XYZ, it means that you don't love her. Understand that it really does feel like you don't love her. Doesn't mean it's true, but in her world, it sure does feel that way. That's valuable to understand that. So use it to have empathy, but don't use it as an excuse not to take action on how you show up in the world.
I like that. I was talking about this the other day that, when you have people that live in bad neighborhoods, there's like this perpetuity of, generation to generation of poverty and gang violence and other things. And the main reason that gets perpetuated because to those people, they learn their whole lives like this is it. This is the cards we were dealt. This is all we got. Yeah. And so it's been this way for generations. So this is just the way it has to be. And it's so ingrained in them. And then if they're not exposed to an environment outside of that, they don't really honestly know that's out there. And I always use my example of that because I grew up in a really bad neighborhoods with my, with the single mom and those things. And we used to look up in the hills at where all the nice houses were where I lived and be like, man, what do those people do? And then instantly you'd go to, well, I don't know, but that's never going to be us. And those are the conversations we used to have. And then I get to high school and I meet a friend of mine who ends up becoming my best friend, and still my best friend to this day. And his stepdad was an attorney, and they lived up in those hills in a big, nice house. And I remember going to his house for the first time, like, oh my gosh, this is like, these are real people in here. And then as I got to know them, they weren't that different than a lot of the people I knew. They just thought this was possible. And just that little bit of exposure broke me out of that thinking of this is the way it has to be for us to, you know what, there are other possibilities. And so I know that if I wasn't exposed to that, I almost shudder to think like, I don't know if I would have broken out of that thought process of that's all there is for me. And so like, I have, you know, tons of compassion for people that are in those circumstances. And, you know, because I kind of firsthand understand it, that just I've kind of been there where I needed something to break me out of those patterns, those thoughts, and show me the possibilities.
I was the same way. I remember high school, college was never a conversation. There was not a conversation in our house, never. And when they talked about it at school, my mindset was like, I would check out because I was like, oh, that's for rich people, right? So that wasn't even an option for me. Like, it was never a conversation. I had no idea I could have gone to college. Had no idea it was even a possibility, right? Until I started, to your point, started having some friends going, I'm like, hey, what are you guys doing after our high school, our senior year, right? And they're like, oh, I'm going to go on a church mission, or I'm going to go to college. And I'm like, wait, you guys aren't that rich, right? And it started like, whoa, like I could do this. Like, it was a possibility. How many times has it been true that a man can't run a sub 5-minute mile?
Yeah.
In history, people have said it numerous times, impossible, until it was possible, until someone created the possibility of it. And thus, I'm going to bring this back around. Thus, the importance of how we show up as men, because we create possibility for others. So as people get to know Sean, as people get to know me, as get to know Ryan, and they see us doing what we do, it creates a possibility for others to do the same. And thus the importance of how we show up in our homes, in our communities, at our jobs, and everywhere else, because often people's limitation of themselves is based upon what they believe is possible.
Yeah.
And possibility is usually created through others leading.
Not even often, the large majority of the time.
Maybe all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Unless
maybe
you're talking about physically
like
flying,
breakthroughs.
some things that are impossible. Like, you can't just physically jump off a building and fly, right? There's, you know,
until someone does, right? So, but yeah, that's good. Anything else, I guess, there, man? I mean, tactics.
No.
I mean, I always question, right?
The
Like,
tactics are get around.
True. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the best perspective.
Yeah. The best way is osmosis. I mean, if you're looking for the best available tactic, is get around those people that are more like you want to be, that have more of what you want to have, and find ways to spend more time with them. And you'll be amazed at how your truth, quote unquote, changes.
Yeah. How about, Ryan said, there are many counterfeits to truth out there and discerning them. So when you hear that, what do you think he's talking about? Counterfeits to truth. Are we talking news?
I think all media, all
religion,
anything, any tech. I mean, all things. It could be anything. There's, I mean, shoot, you see this in all things. You see it in churches, you see it in homes, you see it in media, you see it. I mean, the clearest place is right now in our media and politics and the polarity of it. I mean, literally, most people think the way they do about their politics based on what they listen to and watch. And that's it. Yeah. And honestly, most of them don't go much deeper than that. And it doesn't mean that the majority of what they're listening to is true. They've just allowed it to be what they believe.
Yep. Here's the thought for you. So I'm looking for the author of the 4 Agreements, Don Miguel Ruiz. He wrote a follow-up book called The 5th Agreement. And that 5th agreement, and I'd highly recommend these books, by the way. The 5th agreement is to be a skeptic. But I want to be really clear. it's not to challenge everybody, but it's to look at, like, to understand. It's more in the space of understanding. So when you hear a politician say something, when you hear, I don't know, maybe a questionable church leader say something, or an executive say something, they're overly passionate about getting their objective done, be a skeptic. What's at play? Is this unrighteous dominion? As we know that most men in power will practice unrighteous dominion. Is it that? Is it, if this works, it makes them look good? I mean, being a skeptic also is looking at and realizing that people are walking around constantly concerned. Number one on their mind is what you think about them, constantly. How we dress, how we walk, what we say. We're constantly being controlled and trying to leave a good impression and avoid looking dumb. That's why most people never like public speaking. Why? Oh, because they're afraid of the positive or the negative impact it might leave on people? No, they're concerned about looking like a moron.
Yeah.
We're so obsessed with around what people think that it drives our behavior. So a skeptic knows that, and knows that when someone's nervous when they're speaking, what are they nervous about? They're nervous about what people think of them. And they have a low self-esteem about it, or they don't have confidence about it. When you look at someone in power, be a skeptic. Wonder, geez, is this about a power struggle? Is this about staying in control? If someone wants to be involved in a project and you're like, why is this guy constantly involved? Why? Because maybe he finds his self-value and feels value by being involved in things. Right? Like a skeptic understands human behavior. And so I guess a tactic here is just understand how humans function and realize that a lot of this isn't necessarily in truths. And there's other considerations. And I always use this analogy. It's way more complex. It's never as simple as the soundbite from the news. It's never as simple as other things. We're dealing with humans. We're not that simple. There's a lot going on, right? When Sean says, and I'm not putting you on the spot, Sean, but like if Sean and I are working, like there's more happening. Sean's personality is involved. His history is involved. His thoughts about what I'm thinking about, what maybe he's thinking. And, like all those things are happening. And that's part of being human. And I think our awareness of it and the empathy around it puts us in a really strong area of control and understand and be able to find truths in what's really happening around us.
I like that. As you say that, it just makes me think it's important for us to disconnect the truth from the communicator of that truth. And you see this happen all the time in church. As you were talking, you'd mentioned church a few times where, you could have a pastor that you love and they got this great family life and all these things. And you listen to them for, you go to that church for 10 years and then suddenly that pastor cheats on his wife. And then you're like, oh man, that church, I just wasted 10 years of my life. I shouldn't have been going to that church. I shouldn't have been doing that. Well, you're blaming the church for the failure of a man. And so it doesn't make what he was talking about with, chastity and the importance of that and the importance of the strength of the family and the home in staying true to those things. That doesn't make it less true. It doesn't make the gospel true, but it makes that man human, and they failed and they made a mistake. And we attach the truth to those failures. So we have to be careful of doing that too, separating the two.
All right, Ryan, I think we beat it up. All right, Marcus Segura, do you agree with the statement, your wife is the CEO of your household and you're the CFO? Thanks for your response, gentlemen. Happy New Year. I'm continuing sizable growth and improvement. So first off, Marcus, heck yeah, good job. Way to stay on the path, right? And your path of growth and improvement. Now to your question, right? Do you guys agree? Do you agree with the statement? Your wife is the CEO and you're the CFO.
I don't. And saying that, I always tell people I'm the head of my household, but my wife's the neck. She tells the head where to go.
Yeah.
But I think it's a trap for any of us to give ourselves titles or give ourselves roles. or give each other, even worse, give each other roles, and then have the expectations that that's the only way we're going to do it, because life is fluid and our relationships are fluid. And especially between husband and wife, there's things that need to get done in your household. And maybe, the CEO, CFO, you let your wife run your house as the CEO and do everything there, and you take care of the money, if that's what you're saying. And make sure that you're providing and going to work and doing your job and everything else. But if you come home and let's say you have 4 kids and you get home and the house is a mess and it's disheveled and kids are noisy and whatever, and dinner's not quite ready, that doesn't mean you don't pick up some of the things in the house and get some of that stuff done. Maybe you help finish dinner or whatever it is. You just pick up where the home needs it. And so giving yourself a specific role and saying, well, that was your job, that's just going to lead to future arguments and all those. That's why I don't agree with it. I mean, maybe their focus can be more so on those things, but I wouldn't assign it a title or a role and then have the expectations that that person's supposed to do those things. And because of it, I'm going to stay hands off. And that's where CEO, CFO, it tends to get to, if you're the CEO of a company and your CFO is not doing his job, you fire him. You aren't going to do that in your relationship, and you can't do that in your home. So why? And here's the danger of it. Subconsciously, it could get you to think that way. Now, you might not think that way. As I'm saying these things, you say, oh yeah, that's not what I meant. That's not how I meant the question. I'm just thinking generally, well, if those little things are planted subconsciously in our brain of that's how we're going to do things, that's not healthy and useful either. So that's my thoughts. That's why.
Yeah. I think for me, it lends itself, or at least that statement lends itself to be like, that's her job. This is my job. And the things over there, I'm not worried about. Right. So that doesn't, do I agree with this statement? I don't know. Do I agree with it being a powerful statement? No, I actually disagree. That's not a powerful statement. I think a powerful statement would be that my wife and I are partners. Period.
Yeah.
And if you want to use the business analogy, think of a tech startup. You have 2 partners. You're starting a startup from scratch. And what are you both worried about? Everything. You're both worried about how we're going to grow this thing. Where's our money coming from? What employees, AKA kids, are we going to have? How are we going to organize this org? How do we hold on to our culture? And we're bootstrapped. We're all involved, high trust, and we're all killing it and we're filling in gaps when we need them. That for me resonates. Like, I'm like, yes, that feels accurate. A partnership in a bootstrap startup. Resonates.
Well, that's a clear difference between having an entrepreneur mentality versus an employee mentality too. As an employee, you're generally speaking, and this is at every level, you're going to work just hard enough to not get fired. And in return, they're going to pay you just enough to not quit. And so if that's what you want from your relationship, that's dangerous. But great, do it that way. But an entrepreneur is going to do whatever it takes to make sure and ensure that the company not only stays in business, but grows and thrives. And so that's that difference of that mentality is a major thing in everything that we do.
Steve Hollister, leadership, how to maintain forward momentum in a family unit when your spouse refuses to focus on the family and put her career above us. I've been building a company that produces more than enough income for us. We have 2 kids, 1 on the way. Someone has to be mom. I hit burnout last year trying to be dad and the provider and be mom. Thank you. Tough.
It's tough, but communication has to increase, and it's something you may not enjoy, but also maybe give her resources, things she could plug into to help expand her thought of, what's important, the conversations you have of what's more important. And here's the thing, at this stage in her life, be prepared for her to say, well, right now, this job for me is more important, because there's seasons to everything. It doesn't mean that the family is not, but then maybe there's an adjustment that you guys can agree on. Maybe it's, it's hard to say. I kind of have this with my wife and I, because she definitely worries more about our business and puts more time into it and everything else. Not necessarily because we have to, but because she chooses to do that. And so a long time ago, I just made the decision that I was going to focus more on getting stuff with the kids done, doing, things there, cooking meals, whatever it was, so that she could do that and thrive. And I could encourage her in that. And it helped both of us as our business grew. We make more money. I mean, here's the thing, is that the money lands in the same accounts, so maybe the question is, like, you have to ask yourself is, do you need to keep working? Is she not making enough in there to pay your bills and you're making more? I mean, I don't know that circumstance, because it wasn't super clear in that, but that having other resources, things you can plug into, maybe even things you can go to, whether it's events that help with work-life balance, things like that. This isn't not meant to be a plug for my wife's book, but she wrote a book called Happy and Strong, and that talks about that. And there's some resources, like we recommend a lot of books and things to go to, and most of them are written by guys and done by men. And so for a lot of women, that's hard to take. So if you want a woman's perspective on those things, from a hard charging woman that she can hear from, and then take advice on how to incorporate the balance into your life to help the both of you, I would recommend that. And just more of those types of resources that you can find. The Revitalized Womanhood podcast with Gina, right? With Gina Trimmer. That's a good resource for women to go in, because now they have a lot of women that are stay-at-home moms and things like that. But then there's also some hard charging women in there too, that are business women and entrepreneurs and building businesses of their own, or they're executives in their companies or whatever it is. It's just any resource available to help her be in a place where it's not just, they're not just going to teach you to be, like the boss, be a boss. There's this women's movement. It's a weird space, because for women, you're kind of almost get placed into two places where you're trying to be a, like hashtag boss or whatever. This boss babe kind of movement, I guess you could say, or be strong in your family. But there's not many things that incorporate both and show that you can do both. I think a lot of women are told that they have to make a choice between the two. It's just not true. So find the resources out there that help, and you're going to have to take the charge in finding those things, finding those resources, finding the things that maybe you guys can go to together. Maybe there's counseling you need to take if you need a third party to sit with you and just have the discussions and open the lines of communication more, so that you can figure it out. But I wouldn't just throw away the fact that you're always going to be working either, because maybe there's a transition there for you. I don't know. We don't have enough details.
Well, I'm going to blame this on Ryan Mills, right? Because he got us started talking about truth, right? And so I can't help but now read this and go, Steve, is that true? Is it true that she refuses to put her family before her career? Is that true? Or is that your opinion, right? And now we're placing a lot of harsh judgment without actually understanding what's actually going on. And if, let's say it is true, then I'd pose the question of why? Why is that really important to her? And what are you doing to help her in an area that's really important to her? Right? Is the marriage going well enough that she feels that there's stability in it? If not, maybe she's like, hey, I got to make sure that I can provide for myself. Because if Steve leaves me, then I'm going to be high and dry and I'm not going to be able to take care of my family. So in essence, you could argue that she's putting her family first, right? Do you understand that there's probably a tear for, she's torn in the world that we live in right now that says that if you choose to be a woman and raise a family, that somehow you are less than, that you're not living a fulfilled life unless you have a job and have a career? Is she struggling with that movement from a lot of feminines? Is that a struggle for her? Does she feel valued? Does she feel like she's accomplished things with what she's doing today? And maybe that's why this career is important. I would, instead of jump, and you may have already, Steve, so we're totally projecting on you. If you haven't already, get clear. Like literally just have the conversation, stop the judgment about what she's doing and what she's not doing, and the family's not important. Actually just understand her as a human being, as a woman, and understand like, why is this really important to her? And what does it make her feel? And keep asking the deeper whys and get connected to why she's showing up. I doubt that she's some evil witch that's like, I want to destroy a family and I want to make lots of cash and dominate the world and, hurt people. No, the probability is in her mind, this is clear. This is clear. It's the right thing to do. And there's some reasoning behind it. Your job is to make sure that you can connect to it so you guys can get aligned so you can support her in what she wants to accomplish. You pushing back on this and making her wrong for putting her career before the family may be detrimental to your guys' relationship and to her. This may be her just saying, hey, I'm not finding fulfillment in being a stay-at-home mom, and I'm looking for something more. Okay, then how do you guys do that together? How do you support her in it? Now, establish boundaries, right? If you're getting burned out and you're going to end up having some covert contracts with her and you're going to lash out and stonewall her because you feel like you're being victimed, right, by having to work all the time and do all these other things, well, then communicate that too. Hey, honey, I'm going to support you. I'm going to do all these things. I want you to kill it in life. I love that. I also struggle with doing what I do and this much time with the kids as well. So what can you help me in these areas? Or how do we navigate these waters to pull this off? So you can win. I could support you in winning, and we can make sure our kids win and that this family wins, and you guys figure it out together.
That was so good. And I just can't help but think most of it and what you're talking about, and especially as men, is our ego. Look at my hat, right? It says protect, provide, preside. And in that, as a man, we think, if I'm not a provider, quote unquote, if I'm not the one working, if I'm not the one earning the paycheck, then I'm failing in providing. And that's just not true. And as you were speaking, it made me actually think of Rick Trimmer. I mentioned Gina. Well, if you haven't listened to the episode with Rick Trimmer that Ryan did a few weeks ago, go back and listen to that podcast. Listen to Rick. Here's a guy who's built multiple businesses, very successful financially, done well there, been a provider his whole, life and his whole relationship with his wife, and really made something of their lives together while she was a stay-at-home mom. And now in this season of their life, he's Mr. Mom, and it's flip-flopped. And now he's taking care of the baby and running the kids around and making food, all that. He's doing all of those things. And not that she's not still doing a lot of those things, but it's now the role of provider, quote unquote, if you want to say that, lies more on Gina. But it doesn't make Rick any less of a man. It doesn't make him, it doesn't mean he's not accomplishing his provider role. If anything, he's doing it even more, because enabling her to do what she's going to do could be more profitable for them than any of those other businesses that he built
in realms
before.
And falls into the realm of presiding now as well.
Yeah. But that's the thing, is he has to put his ego aside, and that's hard for almost every man to do, to say, okay, we're going to make her the face now of our providing, of our income source in those things. But because they have super strong communication, they have a good network around them and support around them of people that are successful in those parts of their life that they want to be successful in too, coaching and helping them through those things. And because of that, it's a non-issue in their family. He doesn't feel like, he doesn't walk around, for lack of a better way to say it, as guys, we say, well, I don't want to be a bitch. I don't want to be a, I don't want to be cleaning the house, and I don't want to be, doing that. And some of it's cultural too, how we're taught as kids, or how we grew up and what we see, or whatever that ideal is in our minds. And so if the family's as important to you as you're saying, maybe there's some ego as well that you need to put aside. And like you said, that was so good, Kip, that, just you bringing up the fact of him looking at, is it true or not? And then, and what are you willing to do about it?
We'll give credit to Ryan for bringing up the whole truth conversation, because that's changed the shift as on all these questions as I read them.
Yeah.
Like, well, all right. William Matt Kofer, how do I start finding a dream and goal? I'm having a really hard time finding a purpose. I have a career, a fairly decent one, but it's not something something to push towards. I know I'm supposed to be doing something different, but I have no idea what or how to find it.
Start with maybe things you like to do, things you're interested in, and finding out more about those things and what it takes on the business end. And then if you're not feeling fulfilled in your career and what you're doing to make money, then maybe you start a little side hustle to see if that's interest you. And sometimes that side hustle and the feeling that you get of the excitement of it, whether you're making money or not, sometimes just the effort of putting into that, if you could get passionate about it, is exciting enough to keep you going to your job. Just, and then you can't wait to get home and whatever else. And so I would say start there. Just start searching for things that you're interested in. And now maybe you start and you don't get passionate about it. Cool. Then look for something else you're interested in, and maybe start trying that as well. And it's amazing what incorporating something that you can get passionate about can do to improve all of the other areas of your life. And it could be a number of different things. It could be, I'm a late onset hunter. I started bow hunting, now 6 or 7 years ago. And before that, I never did it. And now I'm super proficient, and I think about it all the time, and I love doing it. And it's something I'm super passionate about. It's when I get to go out and do it, I'm a better person. I'm less grumpy. I'm a better husband and father. I feel better about myself for some reason when I can go out and have success when I go out on hunts. And that's something, 8, 9 years ago, I wouldn't, if you would have told me I'd even be interested, I would have thought you were crazy. And so, but I got interested in sourcing more of my food, and especially my meat. And that got me interested in having conversation. I started asking around. A friend happened to be in town. I asked him, and he's super passionate about bow hunting, and he started for the same reasons. And so he was a great resource for me and helped me. And then it became a passion of mine. And so, but it wasn't, I would have never thought it was, but it was getting interested in one thing, one part of my life I wanted to change or improve. Started asking questions to people I knew who
tried it
did
out,
or were in that arena, and it turned into a passion. There's other things that I've thought that too, that didn't, things like golf. Like I like golfing every now and then, but I'm not passionate about it. I was told a long time ago, like, if you want to find more business deals and stuff like that, start golfing. So I did it for that, got interested in it. I started doing it a bunch. And then I was literally on the golf course one day and figured out I'd rather be surfing. So like, why am I spending 4 hours here on this golf course? I could have spent the same 4 hours. I could be surfing somewhere. I could have spent the same time, the same money, the same effort doing something I'm passionate about and that I love, instead of being here. And so I don't look at that as wasted time. It was actually great for me to figure that out, because then I could be more effective with my time and do the things that made me a better human.
Totally. Here's an interesting thought, because I'm thinking from William's perspective, right? Like I'm self-evaluating, and I went in IT because it sounded like a good idea, not because it was a dream or a goal or a passion. But things have evolved in a way that now, and it sounds cheesy. I don't know why I don't like to use the word like my dream or my passion or whatever, but nonetheless, I think there's alignment. There's currently alignment in my life around what I do really well, what I really enjoy, and what I do for work. There's
That's
great alignment,
super important.
right?
So important.
And
Yeah.
so then I have to ask myself, well, how did I get here, right? Because the alignment is not in the space of IT. So was it by chance? Here's a thought. I think that whenever I've had a job, I try to magnify it always, whatever it is that I do. And I think when we do that, we'll naturally bring our talents and our passions into whatever the job is, right?
Mm.
So if you're a really social guy, let's say you're just a charismatic guy that people just love being around you, and your job is to clean an office space. Now, you could get the job done, put your headphones on, and just clean the office space and get the job done and leave, and then submit a question to the Order Man podcast and go, you know what? I need to find passion in what I do. Or that guy that looks at cleaning the office and goes, you know what? This is not for me, but I'm going to magnify this thing. I'm going to have fun with this, and I'm going to bring my talents to the table. That guy's probably not wearing his headphones. Instead, that guy is probably walking through the front office and saying hi to the front office lady. Hey, how you doing today? You having a great day? Yeah. Oh man, it's such a great day. Having a conversation. Come over to my desk and say, man, working late again, huh? Man, how often do you work late at night? And we have a conversation about why I'm always in the office at 8 p.m. at night when no one else is in the office. And I form a relationship with this guy. I like this guy. He's a cool cat. I have a good conversation with him. He starts figuring out through magnifying his job what he's good at. And he goes, geez, what am I good at? Talking to people. I have a great time talking with people. And then all of a sudden he starts finding his talent and his passion in the work that he's currently doing. And then before you know it, someone goes, hey, you know what, Bob? You know what you're really good at? You're really good at just talking with people. Will you do new employee orientations for when we do new hires? Because you're so great and everyone feels valuable about like how you show up and the way the conversation you have. And now all of a sudden opportunities present themselves because we magnified what was already in our lap.
Mm.
I actually honestly believe I have good alignment in those areas right now in my life due to one factor, because I magnified what I had. That's it. And eventually someone says, geez, Kip, you're a really good communicator. And for whatever reason, and it sounds even odd saying it because I feel a little embarrassed about it, but it's like you somehow have a way to inspire and motivate people. I would have never had that on my radar, would have never been a thing for me if it wasn't just me being me and trying to do whatever was in my lap and magnify it and do it well.
Mm.
And before you know it, all of a sudden, I realized I have a talent for something I had no idea I had a talent for. Zero. Church is the same similar thing. You know this, Sean. We have opportunities to teach often. I got a calling to teach gospel doctrine. Kip Sorensen, farm boy from Elsinore, didn't even know I was LDS until I was like in 7th grade because I wanted to go to a Catholic church. And my mom was like, no, we're this. And I'm like, what's that? Like literally, I don't consider myself a scholar in gospel, but I wanted to magnify that calling. I took it really serious. And ironically enough, it's a talent I have, apparently. I have people like, no joke, someone last Sunday before last, came up to me and said, Kip, my prayer is answered. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, seriously, I literally have prayed that you would start teaching gospel doctrine again because I am so edified when you teach.
Wow.
What? Weird, right? Like, that's not a thing for me. Like, I'm not walking around with this perception. But that was made possible just because I magnified what was given to me. So I'm a little bit on a soapbox here, but it's like, man, this opportunity for us to dream and find our goals and alignment between passion and talents. I think they're on our laps. I think they're on our laps right now with wherever we are. And when we magnify, our God-given talents will show up and people will see them. And opportunities will present themselves. I don't want to take away from anything that you've said, Sean, because part of that is someone might go, oh, Kip, you're so great at this. And I'm like, well, great, but maybe I have a ceiling where I'm at, right? To use that talent or that thing that I love doing. So I'm now going to go try something else, right? And I'm going to go try this thing and I need to try things, but I would have never even known what those were without me taking some action.
Yeah, no, that's great. Profound. I nothing to add to that. I think it's the perfect way to end it, actually. That was awesome.
All right. Tyler Henderson. Compliments are so weird. Like, I feel like a full transparency. How do you deal with compliments? Do you deal with compliments?
Super awkward. No, not at all. I literally like
them, but I don't like it.
Yeah, I get weird, fidgety when people do it. Yeah, I don't take it well. And this has to be the last one. It's rapid fire on this one.
All right, sorry. Tyler Henderson. I'm a 29-year-old husband and father of 2 great boys, a 6-year-old and a 1-year-old. I have so much to learn, but I can tell a huge difference in my maturity level as a father at age 29 than I was at age 23. That said, what are a few things that you wish you would have known as a young father? What advice would you give a younger version of yourself as a young dad?
I would have evaluated earlier what I want my family life to look like and be like, the actions necessary to be able to do that, and then compare it to how I grew up so I could get rid of, we were talking about our truths, so I could reevaluate the truth from my truth and then take appropriate actions to change my habits in some of those areas. And most of it was reactionary. I still do it to this day. The IC helped a ton with that. And starting to battle plan, coming in and realizing like I hadn't been taking actions quarterly towards being a better husband and father. So what are some things I need to do? One of the things I need to do is stop yelling at my kids, stop reacting, stop, and because the way I grew up, it was upset. I got, it's like you did something and instantly that triggered my mom or my grandma. And before you know it, not only are they screaming at you, but they're hitting you or whatever, right? Like that's how I grew up. And I thought that's how you do it, and so I wish I would have gotten rid of that faster. I mean, I'm there now, which is great, but I wish that would have happened earlier, where I found more of how it can be and the idea of what I wanted, and then started implementing and changing some of the habits to get me there.
Totally. Yeah, man. Probably the same. The only other thing that crosses my mind is, I'm a better father because I'm a better person, and so I would connect to that too, like how much of my baggage and my shortcomings I'm just projecting on my kids. And if I just shaped up and was a better person, I would just be a better father, and so those are things that cross my mind. And then the last thing is just, I don't know, maybe I'm getting old, man, but just time. It's passing us, man. And you're never going to get it back. I look at my older boys and I wish that they're babies. I wish I had that time with them again. You know what I mean? Cause I miss it.
Mm-hmm.
And I won't. So taking advantage of the time that we have and really loving and this is one thing that I think Asia and I have done really. We're old parents. We have like 2 batches of, like, my oldest boy is 23 and I have a 4-year-old, right? That's a massive gap. And we call it batch 1 and batch 2. We're better with batch 2 because we're loving it. That's why we're loving it. We're so,
and everybody says that, by the way. And it doesn't even have to be batch 1, batch 2. It could be your oldest from your youngest. Everybody says they did better with their youngest than with their oldest because you learn so much with your oldest.
Totally. Yeah. But I think the biggest thing we learn is just to take advantage of it.
Be
Love
present.
it. Be present while you have it. Just be fully present. All right. Sean, thank you, man. This is a good conversation. All right. So gentlemen, a couple things, call to actions to learn more about the Iron Council. It's closed for membership, but if you want to sign up for the newsletter, learn more so you can sign up next quarter, that's orderofman.com/Iron Council. We filled in some questions from our Facebook group today. That's facebook.com/group/Order of Man. And as always, connect with us on the social medias. To connect with Mr. Mickler, that's at Ryan Mickler on Twitter and Instagram. And for all other things, go to orderofman.com, whether it's the store or accessing other content, subscribing to the podcast, as well as accessing the YouTube channel. Sean, thank you, man. I always appreciate our conversations and the opportunity I have to chat with you. And gentlemen, until next time, take action and become the men you were meant to be.